the bottom in terms of positions. So what the 192 and what the 227 reflects is a 3.7 FTE rather than a 5.7 FTE, because you're basically not budgeting for two positions.
Currently, there's one open position that we're not budgeting for. That's a senior planner position.
Well, I would say when you jump from 227 to 299, it sounds like you're budgeting, yeah.
That I'm what?
It sounds like you are budgeting if you jump from 227 to 299 like that.
That I'm budgeting?
It sounds like it's being budgeted. It looks like it's being budgeted, because longevity can't be $60,000.
This department's done some reclassifying and some board-approved actions that have moved people around, paid them a different range. So if you want to look at the history of that,
Yeah, let's
probably the department could go back and print out the salary
Yeah.
benefit page. You could look
I'd
at it, you'll
like-
see what that is.
Yeah, I'd like to look at it and see it, because when you say the board approved this, the board, when it approves these things, and I'm saying that's no problem. It's done in real incremental, so we approve the cap here, we approve the pin there, we approve the pack. It's all little bits and pieces, and it doesn't add up to the sum. And now we're looking at the sum. I'd like to see what all those little pieces and the variances that have come and go. I have no problem with it. I just want to understand why we make that kind of jump. Because that's part of the understanding of trying to figure out where $2 million is, that, you know, how much of our monies that I mean, hey, if we can pull out 50,000 here and go put it into the long-term investment of the sales, property tax, bad property tax, and earn 50% on our money, you know, I may be interested in doing that. I mean, I want to be able to have that option, is what I'm saying.
Can I?
Larry, yeah, you bet.
Thank
Larry,
you. Just on the cost of the department, like on the salaries, I mean, I just want to add that, I'd like to see if we're going to do an exercise, you know. I think it's important to also, as a for instance, like the line item, as Jim pointed out, is $299, but then I think these type of things need to be factored in. I mean, this is a direct result from one of the employees in the $299 that, you know, because of his good work and not being, I know how it is, you know, being a business owner. There's only so many hours in a day. And if everybody gets to the point where we can save money in the wrong areas and everybody's like so overly worked, taxed, stressed out, there's a good chance like this grant would have been received. So I think it's important to also look at it like, I mean, this is $149,000 coming in as a result of money that you're paying out, you know, in that line item, $299. So you could also present the case that, you know, it's costing only $150,000 net in that, you know, so I don't know, maybe there's more grants, but I think it's in your best interest, you know, we gotta to present all that stuff, because I mean, this is like, this is directly offsets, you know, the monies in those salaries, so, I don't know, I mean, one more of these and the department's cost is zero for salaries.
Well,
If you follow.
variation on that theme, this represents the fifth one, and probably is the least amount of money out of all the grants that we've gotten out of this program.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's what my point is, that it's important to show both sides of the coin, you know, not just the, you know, we're you know, trying to figure out and cut and all that, but, I mean, there's also, you gotta focus on what you're bringing, producing with that revenue, and it's a lot of money, like these grants, you know. But when you look at it, it doesn't really, that part of it doesn't really get spotlighted. It's just sort of like the outgoing, so.
Well, I'm here telling you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've been at about this almost by accident.
No, not an accident, I bring it to your attention.
But I mean, so when you do the exercise, I'm saying like, you know, what Jim's asking for, maybe put a bit of information in there too, about the incomes received.
Yeah, and I would have, as you pointed out, it was last minute, so
Yeah.
I'm pleased to report it.
Where this property money, is this for the groundwater monitoring that this county is gonna do, that we give you, all to you instead of the DWR?
Correct.
Have you started doing that yet?
No,
You shadowed them.
we're shadowed.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
shadowed.
they're still in control at this
Right.
moment.
Right, so I mean, when you start doing it, I guess what I'm saying is maybe this is not showing on here as an income, but it's also the expense you do this groundwater monitoring is not showing in here either. We have, once we start putting a man in the field, you have to hire another man, you gotta.
No. No, we've accounted for that with the natural resource technician / mining inspector.
So that's what I needed to know, because there will not be a incurred expense once this man hits the field, we take over.
Might be
We
some
have
mileage or
an
something like
FTE
that.
assigned to that
Yeah.
task.
Won't be the first one.
One of the things that accounts for the change in the salary line, and I think you've seen this pattern in all the departments, is the salary agreements we have with our employees. And the board, you know, is obviously know where we gave employees a 6.1% increase to offset the employee share of hers.
Yeah,
And that affects, you know, that affects the retirement costs going up,
Right.
the extra help and overtime.
we took out, when you look at these numbers that are here, there was 72,000 was the increase. So there was 12,000 was the employer paying the employee share, so that was zeroed out to be zero. So that counts for 12 of the 72,000. And so the 60,000 I'm talking about is, I can see, you know, putting in the technician position, I can see the longevity. I'm just trying to piece together what accounts for that $60,000 jump. And it sounds like to me that those previous two budget years, the 192 and the 227, being the amounts that were there, was we weren't funding and using the actuals that were expended, was not accounting for 5.7 employees. Sounds like we had 3.7 employees being paid. So basically what that 299 represents is all those kind of shifts you just talked about, plus we're basically getting back up to full staffing at 5.7 level. And that's the answer I kind of pieced together based on the response. Now, I may be right, I may be wrong, but that's how I interpret it. So, and I'm satisfied with that. I just want to understand why. So now we have a planning department with 5, almost 6 bodies rather than 3, almost 4 bodies. And that's cool, especially if they bring in $149,000. They just need to find the other $300,000 for us.
Working on that.
More on the same page, you go down to services and supplies, there's a dramatic jump. What's the reason on that?
In the planning area, it's primarily a result of sharing the plotter with Public Works. Plotters create maps and basically are a fancy printer. But it's needed for GIS and doing maps, and that's, I think, about $13,000. As well as we've budgeted for a new copier. And it's a everything copier. Our copier is about to die, and it's a costly copier.
We're estimating around 12,000.
Well, I think we put in 15, but we hope to do better.
Before we leave planning, we want to talk about the housing element.
Oh, yeah, good point, thank you.
I mean, it's,
Yeah, I
it's not
recommend,
in, it's not in the CAO recommended, because we can move that over to.
yeah, during the budget hearings, I recommended that the housing element be paid for out of the geothermal fund, which is an allowable use. And then I was absent when there was discussion of taking it out of geothermal and making it come out of general fund. And I would just ask the board if they want to consider putting it back in the geothermal to help with the general fund budget. And I think that was 50-something,
48.7.
48.7.
What you guys have in the budget.
So, if that's agreeable, I would recommend that we do that.
And that's not in the CAO's recommended, that was the difference, obviously, the primary difference between the two. Jim?
Well, Mr. Chairman, since I was the one that questioned the legitimacy of using the geothermal fund to fund the housing element, and, you know, I still find that kind of an odd connection that the housing element would be legitimate, that the nexus is there. But, you know, given the general fund situation like it is and the need for getting that housing done, if that is the only way we're gonna be able to get it done, then I would withdraw my objection, but I still think that, you know, I still find it is, you know, whoever writes the rules, if they make that as a rule, I just find that to be really odd.
And then before leaving planning, well, it's in both planning and building, but just briefly on code enforcement, we have 90 open cases, investigations. We've done substantial work in Westwood. 2 abatements have been accomplished, as well as there's 1 ongoing abatement that will need to be resolved in this next fiscal year. I sort of jokingly at the budget hearing said, you know, I'd like the abatement money to be in the neighborhood of $30,000, and I sort of laughed out of the room. Generally, we have between, I think, 10 and 12 in there. I think 10 is proposed right now. That's really the board's pleasure to decide what they want to do with that. You know, in Westwood, every 3rd house is empty. And so, you know, there really is no end to it. We're very cautious, and we contemplate what we identify as a top project. But there are costs associated with that. Now, sometimes the property will end up being liened and we'll get that money back. But it isn't always the case, and in Westwood it's not the case. You could have an abatement cost $25,000, and when it's all said and over with, the building's gone and the property's worth $6,000 to $8,000. So I leave it to the board how much they want to put in that fund. But $10,000 is a pittance, really.
There's currently 30 right now.
Oh, you took me serious?
Oh,
Actually, listen to you.
I didn't know I had that. Okay.
I did listen to you. I talked to you, and I think
There is 30 in it.
But
there is some current projects.
But for the record, though, I was laughed out of it.
It's in non-departmental,
Oh, and non-departmental.
so that's
Yeah.
100-0101. If you're going in numeric order behind tab 2, it's the 4th, 5th page.
Okay.
And there's 30 right now. The original was 10.
And, you know,
You're bad with houses.
I better shut up. I also, just a matter of record, the amount of calls the code enforcement officer gets is pretty astonishing. And clearly they don't all result in investigations. But even anonymous calls, need to be looked at sometimes. You know, if we get a call and it's, seems benign and nobody wants to leave their name, we don't normally go out and look. But if it's, hey, there's children at risk, I'm calling anonymously, we go look. And, there's nothing really in terms of revenue for code enforcement. It's another one of those public functions that really doesn't get a lot of revenue, but it's essential and very important.
And I get a lot of calls.
I get that.
And I call Maury, and I'll tell him, thank you, he takes care of it, he sends a man up, wherever it be in my district. And it's
Yeah.
taken care of, there's a report done. We know exactly if it's a phony call or a worthwhile call.
Yeah, I would be remiss if I wasn't to mention Brian Heatherton, and he's our new code enforcement officer. Well, he's not really that new anymore, but he's really been a crackerjack and responsive. And, is very responsible and knows what he's talking about.
Code enforcement every day is public safety, it's important.
It is important.
I mean, Jim in Cedarville, you don't have that issue.
Well, believe me, we do, and I get a lot of calls, but they're not directed to his department, they're directed to City Hall. And believe me, we've got more messes in town than you can imagine.
Well, I-
Brought to your
They got
attention,
one
that
of
was
them-
brought to your attention.
They got one of them cleaned up
Yeah,
down by the
that's
Catholic
great.
church here finally after I don't know how long.
That's great, though. It looks
Yeah,
great.
but I mean, we've got one right across the street here if you see one starting to develop.
It's a big issue in the county and in any county.
Well, and I'm not.
30,000 is nothing.
Okay, the fact that my district does not go into the unincorporated areas does not mean that it's lost on me the significance throughout the county. And I have ever refused to be serious about what happens around the county because I see it firsthand even here in the city. And the city residents, you know,
Sir,
the good benefit of having a city is at least the ones here in town don't get kicked upstairs and add to his burden. We have to deal with the folks across the street. And they are now cracking down and they're dealing with it fairly effectively.
I would suggest that it has.
Go down on North Mesa Street in your district, okay, your new part of your district,
You
North Mesa
duck on
Street, and North Spring Street in your district. There's 2 of them right now being worked on by the city.
Well, thank you, City.
So we're taking care of you, Bob.
Well, thank you, Jim.
yeah,
I really appreciate people that take care of me.
Yeah.
certainly, I think we all have desire. That's the one thing, you know, it's like a sheriff almost, you know, when you call that number, you want somebody to help and somebody to understand.
Take a look, that's all.
Yeah. So, moving on to building,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna excuse myself. I'm gonna be gone for the next hour, so gotta take care of other people.
What can we do while you're gone?
You guys can do whatever you want to, and I'll come back and fix it when you're done.
Can I go while he's gone?
Okay,
Yeah,
Mr.
traffic
Chairman.
at the intersection, John, steam blowing out.
Come on, Richard, let's go.
Can I leave too?
all right, so that's the budget.
I got a tractor at the intersection in Johnsonville, steam blowing out of it, so I gotta fix it.
Okay, moving on to building.
Go ahead.
Brief overview. Kelly receives over 20 calls a day. As I said, that's over 3,000 calls a year. And I just want to because I want to recognize the 3 people that are making things work. And Kelly's an essential part of that and has been. She's doing more. She's a technician now. Jim Papin, who's been the acting building official, has really been responsive in terms of fixing systems, fixing the way we conduct business, the way we relate to people. He's been fresh air, and he's looking at everything. I think our previous county council had a sign in his office that said, "Because that's the way we've always done it, we're not doing that. We're looking at everything," and we've corrected some situations that were catastrophic, that we weren't doing things right, and we're on the right path now. Mike Johnson, who in this budget I am asking that we bump him up to Building Inspector 3. He was hired in 2003 as a 2 and has never been promoted. I think it's a travesty. He's an essential part of our building team. He travels 300 miles a day and does inspections throughout the county. He's well respected by our contractors, but he's no slouch. He doesn't give away the farm. You know, he makes sure things are done correctly, and he has that reputation. And I'm hopeful that this, if it happens and if the board agrees to bump him up, that we have him for a while longer, because he has the skills to go elsewhere, and that would be unfortunate for the county, because, you know, I mean, the variation on the theme here is we've invested in these people, and we have gone through all these people leaving our county departments, especially planning, and you can't retrieve that training, and you can't retrieve that institutional knowledge. And so, you know, I'm really focused on keeping a core group of people that are hitting on all cylinders and know what they're talking about. And that requires us to recognize those people and keep them trained up. And so, just briefly on permit activity, obviously it's not 2003 anymore, and we see a cliff in terms of single-family residences. They're just not happening. That is not only a function of the economy, but as the new sprinkler requirement as well. So people would rather tear a house down to the studs and rebuild it than have to rebuild it with sprinklers. And so that's resulted in only 4 single-family residences in the last fiscal year. Increase, though, in manufactured homes, which was 5, and not an increase from 2003, but those are do not require sprinklers currently, and so we're seeing more of those. But we did 655 inspections, primarily Mike, but Mike was out part of the year. But 655 inspections, a total of 396 permits were issued, and they break down like this: 4 single-family residents, 18 remodels or additions, 15 garages, shops or barns, 5 manufactured homes, 15 commercial projects, 52 wells, 34 septics, 69 re-roofs, and 74 electrical permits. So, yeah, we're not doing houses very much, but we're active, and people are doing more with what they got. And so that's just the trend. So, in terms of the building department, again, there's an increase, roughly, I think $30,000, $36,000 in services, as well as salary. And again, that's primarily bumping up. Actually, that's not an accurate number anymore either, because the budget contemplated the building official who's no longer with us, with the department. So that number is yet to be eked out. That was somebody with all the ranges and all the longevity, so that number is not correct, and I don't know what the true number will be with the new building official.
If you took your salaries, for instance, for last year, 12-13 actuals, you took your salaries plus your extra help, I could make the argument you're actually decreasing, or those two items are equal.
Yeah,
We probably won't get the treasurer till after lunch, just to let you know. We can do the assessor, I believe, just so you.
Yeah, so,
Wednesday.
yeah,
I just
I
came
don't,
here to comment on community development.
yeah, that would surprise me. By the way, I'm gonna be hanging out, so do what you must. Anyway, I think we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I'm sorry I can't give you exact numbers, because it didn't occur to us that the numbers that were budgeted were.
Your salaries actual were 248 and extra help was 63, so that's over 300 right there.
Right. So any questions on building? And there's a mass amount of training budgeted into that. And that's just a necessity. You have a new building code coming up in January. As well, we have to have credentialed, qualified people at the top. Otherwise, we're putting the county at risk when we make decisions.
So did you said earlier that there was one unfilled position?
In building? That was, I think we were talking about planning.
Oh, okay.
The Mylar right there.
And what was that again?
Overhead.
What unfilled was that?
For planning,
Yeah.
it was a senior planner.
So what, if you got somebody in the works or not?
No, currently I'm not seeking to fill that position.
Any other question or comment?
We don't have any unfunded positions in building.
Supervisor Alba has a question for you.
On your publication and legal notices, you went to 6,500 from 1,500 up. Just what's the?
I think we under budgeted previously. And you're in building?
Yeah, building inspector.
We were not having abatement hearings, we were not doing anything that required those kind of functions. And so, like in the last year, we've done 2 abatements, we've started 3 others, and they required legal noticing and all kinds of things. So we weren't doing that function of code enforcement and building. And the code enforcement officer's reports has not